Ration coupons are something only used in regions facing severe food shortages. They bypass the market economy entirely and allow strictly fixed food distribution. In the modern world, with advanced technology, global food production is overall sufficient. In some countries, food is so abundant that it's turned into alcohol or fuel. Massive amounts are fed to livestock with huge energy losses. This is commonplace. So the word ration coupon has vanished from the world for a long time. Even in the poorest African nations, you don't hear about people using ration coupons anymore. Yet no one expected that Japan, in today's modern society, would begin introducing ration coupons nationwide. The direct reason Japan is pushing ration coupons is a nationwide food shortage and soaring food prices. Rice prices have skyrocketed to a horrifying 50 RMB per jin, far higher than China's 2 RMB per jin. Japan is seeing people unable to afford rice. Many are lining up to scramble for rice. And the combination of surging prices and short supply has caused many grain dealers to hoard rice, pushing prices even higher to calm public anger and ensure the lower classes can still eat. The Japanese government tested vouchers last year to directly discount rice. This year, they moved to ration coupons to buy rice. You now need both money and ration coupons. Under normal circumstances, Japan should never be facing this. There is no global rice shortage, especially with the US. The world's top food exporter, which has more food than it can sell. Call Japan an American ally or a semi-colony, whatever you prefer. But as long as Japan wants to buy rice from the US, America has no reason not to sell. And if you look at wholesale bulk prices, American grain is far cheaper than China's. But Japan has the powerful Japan agricultural cooperatives, which fiercely opposes food imports. Getting them to allow even a small amount of foreign grain, even from the US, is next to impossible. Even a food crisis won't persuade them. The rare occasions they do allow small import quotas are purely to pacify public anger. The Ya absolutely refuses to let rice imports solve Japan's food shortage. Ordinary Japanese people going hungry. What does that have to do with Ya? In fact, the hungrier the people are, the more profit it makes. And so far, no one has starved to death yet. While Japan faces a food crisis and runaway rice prices, its GDP is falling again. Q3 2025 GDP growth is minus 2.3%. Yes, negative 2.3%. China currently has plus 5% GDP growth and many people still feel money is hard to earn. Imagine how the Japanese feel with minus 2.3%. Even worse, this isn't an accident, it's the norm. In 1995, Japan's per capita GDP was $40,000. In 2021, it was still $40,000 to 26 years of zero economic growth. The US dollar inflates every year, but Japanese incomes have stayed the same in dollar terms, meaning Japanese people have been absorbing inflation every year, with real living standards falling for 26 years straight. And it gets worse. After the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022, Japan's GDP plummeted, dropping to $32,000 per capita by 2024. A 20% contraction in just 3 years, Japan lost 1/5 of its economy. By this year, GDP fell another 2.3% on top of last year's low base. This number looks terrifying to us. But to Japan it isn't even a crash, the decline has actually slowed down. With GDP in free fall and the economy failing, Japan's top priority should be boosting the economy. Cutting interest rates is the most direct and effective tool. But Japan has instead been raising rates aggressively. The country once famous for zero interest rates now has government bond yields at 2.945%, matching historical highs. Japan relied on zero interest rates to barely maintain zero growth, and now, amid negative growth, it has raised rates to the highest level in history. Japan has no choice that in theory you cut rates during a recession. But the US raised its bond yields above 5%, creating a massive interest rate gap. Japan allows free currency exchange and unlimited purchases of US bonds. If you're Japanese, holding yen to buy domestic bonds yields almost zero. Convert them to dollars and you get 5%. Japan can't stop you. So anyone with means will convert yen to dollars and buy US debt. Only the poorest Japanese keep yen in their bank accounts. Japan's foreign exchange reserves were bleeding out severely for 2 years until it couldn't take it anymore, and was forced to raise rates. In truth, Japan held out admirably. Most countries follow the US rate hikes immediately, or their FX reserves collapse in months. Japan resisting for 2 years is impressive. China is the only major country daring to not follow US rate hikes. In fact, China has been cutting rates. But China has capital controls, world-leading asset returns, and massive trade surpluses, over $1 trillion a year, to offset the outflows. Japan doesn't have these advantages, so it must raise rates. This worsens an already collapsing economy. On top of that, Japanese capital is fleeing overseas. In September 2025, Japan signed a deal with Trump promising $550 billion of investment into the US, while the US slapped 15% tariffs on Japanese goods. How much of the agreement will be enforced is unclear, but some of it certainly will, meaning capital flight from Japan to the US is locked in. As a US semi-colony, when America needs money, draining Japan is normal. But simultaneously, in the first 9 months of 2025, Japanese investment in China surged over 55% year-on-year, voluntarily, without any treaties forcing them. Despite US-Japan pressure discouraging investment in China, Japanese capital still pours in. This proves how attractive China is and how desperate Japan has become. Japanese incomes have stagnated for 26 years, collapsed continuously for the last 4, while prices have soared. What remains of their $30,000 GDP per capita is held up by rice that costs 50 RMB per jin. At the same time, capital flees abroad. This is Japanese life today and has been for decades. Why does Japan produce extreme right figures like Senate Takaichi, and even elect such a person as Prime Minister? Now you can see why the Japanese have become hopeless. They no longer believe normal economic development can restore their prosperity. America has boxed in Japan's future. When the US was strong, it could at least feed Japan enough to survive. Now that the US is weak, Japan is collapsing rapidly. This year is bad, but the future will be worse, and everyone can see it. Takaichi is far right, but not the most extreme. There is someone even more extreme, Kotohiro Hashimoto, a female member of Japan's parliament, occupying the same political niche as Takaichi, but further right. Her book is titled A New Affirmation of the Greater East Asia War. The infamous claims such as Chinese history is fabricated, Japan historically advanced China, and Japan never invaded China all originated from her. Many think Takaichi is crazy. Hashimoto is even crazier. Recently, she has repeatedly criticized Takaichi for being too soft internationally. Hashimoto's political proposals include: even without American help, Japan must support Taiwan and has the confidence to independently defeat the PLA. Japan must retake the northern territories, demand that Russia cede East Siberia as compensation, and acknowledge Japan's protectorate status over Korea. If Russia refuses, Japan should wage war, and she claims Japan can independently defeat Russia. Japan must deploy troops to Israel and defeat it. Her logic: this will help Japan seize the moral high ground and become a new global beacon. Because Israel invades weaker nations and lacks morality. Hashimoto declares that once Japan completes these 3 tasks, the Idarista will treat Japan as an equal partner and acknowledge Japan's dominance in Asia. in exchange for Japan acknowledging US dominance in the Americas. This is the reality of Japan's political arena. Members of parliament openly calling for simultaneous wars against China, Russia, and even Israel. Their ultimate goal is merely equal treatment by the U.S. Japan's psychological inferiority to the U.S. is truly extreme. So Japan's madness isn't Takaichi alone, it's collective. The core reason is economic collapse. Politics is built on economics, frankly. If Japan really had the capability to defeat both China and Russia, the US would kneel and call them father. Yet Japan only dares fantasize about being treated equally. That's how deeply inferior they feel. Today's Japan would fight anyone except the US. Even Israel, America's father figure, is on their list. Defeating Israel might earn them a good reputation. Domestic voices calling for simultaneous war against China and Russia have already reached the level of members of parliament. That's why China and Russia have decided to align their strategies regarding Japan. Strategic alignment is a new term. My understanding is, China and Russia have reached a strategic consensus on Japan-related issues. They are jointly warning Japanese politicians not to fantasize about war against China and Russia. Otherwise, the two will take collective defensive action. When you see the statements of Takaichi, the rhetoric of Hashimoto, Japan's absurd food crisis despite being backed by America's massive grain reserves, and the speed of Japan's economic and income collapse, you understand why China and Russia find it necessary to align strategically. Japan may not refrain from war just because there's a 99% chance of losing. They have historical precedents, and today's discourse and public sentiment are genuinely deranged.